Minister, thank you for joining us.
Of course, Michael.
Listen, I want to begin with some reaction to your decision with this P-8 Polaris, a Unifor, which represents many of this country's aerospace workers. They criticized this sole source procurement process. They said by not considering a Canadian alternative, your government was doing great harm to workers in this country. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I would just simply remind them, first of all, when we entered into this agreement to purchase the P-8, we have negotiated a pretty significant investment benefits package for the country, which will result in billions of dollars being invested in Canadian industry. It's going to create as many as 3,000 jobs right across Canada, and additionally it's going to add about $358 million to our gross domestic product. These are pretty significant benefits. And as well, I would just also simply point out to them, these are benefits that will begin almost immediately because this is the plane that's already, it has these capabilities and it's in production. Every other alternative that we looked at was a development proposal rather than a plane. There was only one plane that met the capability requirements of the Royal Canadian Air Force, and that was the Poseidon, and so that's the one we went with. And in purchasing that, those benefits will begin almost immediately. The alternative was filled with uncertainty because, you know, when a development project, it does require a long time to go through a different type of procurement process. It also requires time in development well before production could possibly begin. And as a consequence, there's a lot of uncertainty around schedules and capability and cost. And so my responsibility is to get the Canadian Air Force what they need, and this is what they said they needed. And so we've delivered that. But I would want to assure the workers at Unifor, we care very much about Canadian workers, and this is going to actually secure about 3,000 Canadian jobs. Okay,
3,000 Canadian jobs. I hear what you're saying, but how do you address the concerns that were brought up by the Quebec government, by the Ontario government, the Bloc Québécois today in the House, basically saying that you're ignoring the workers and Bombardier, Canadian Quebec company, with this choice?
I would want to assure them that that's simply not true. First of all, we looked at, there are also workers in the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Air Force. We wanted to make sure that we delivered the capability that they required. That not only did we provide them with a platform, the plane, that they needed to do their job, but it was a safer plane. It has much greater capability in doing the job. It'll make them more effective, but it'll also help them keep them safe while they're doing the job. And at the same time, there's a very real difference between we looked at, in the national interest, we believed that we needed to meet those capabilities for the Canadian Armed Forces as quickly as possible. There was only one option available to us. There was only one plane that met those requirements. That was the Poseidon P-8. There were many other companies that had proposed a development option. They didn't have a plane that met those requirements, but they had an interest in developing them. And so if we'd gone in, there was no guarantee that any company would have been successful in that procurement process. And I think a lot of people have made an assumption that it was a competition between, you know, two companies as opposed to many. But the reality was there was one plane that met the requirements. That's the plane that we bought because that's the plane we need right now. And it had those requirements. I have great confidence in Canadian aeronautic industry, and you know there are some really great companies out there, but they did not have a plane that met these requirements, and unfortunately, right now we needed that plane.
Okay, you know, you keep referencing the requirements, Minister. Walk us through exactly what were you looking for? What does this plane need to achieve?
Yeah, there are a number of things. We use that plane primarily. The best way to describe it is a submarine hunter. And so it had to be able to have the equipment, the new modern equipment, the new technology that enables them to do that. There are also other requirements with respect to, it's primarily around defense and lethality, as well as the capability of holding a significant payload in order to carry the electronic equipment that is necessary to do that increasingly difficult job. I'll also tell you that the Air Force has told us very clearly that submarine detection and hunting and tracking, which is their primary mission, has become increasingly difficult because some of our air adversaries have been significantly changing the threat environment and investing in greater stealth and persistence and lethality in their submarines. those planes are also used for search and rescue. They have a number of other, very significant requirements. The Canadian Armed Forces defined that for us, and we went looking to what was available and what could be made available to deliver on that. And frankly, there was only one option. It was not only the right choice, it was the only choice. And that was the Poseidon P-8. And so that's why we made that decision to purchase that plane. And because it answered the requirements, as I've said a number of times, of the Air Force. And it was the only one that did that.
Okay, the only choice, but it was also clearly Washington's choice. Does that create any optical issue for your government?
No, I would hope not, because frankly, I want to be really clear, this was Canada's choice. Canada began looking at this. In 2017, the then Defense Minister, Minister Sajjan, began an initiative under the Strong, Secure, and Engaged Defense Policy to begin looking at the replacement of the CP-140. There has been a lot of work done over the last couple of years, and by my immediate predecessor, Minister Anand, to try to find if there were any alternatives that met the requirements of the armed forces. There are, I think, real advantages, by the way, in this particular model, because it is being used by all of our Five Eyes partners. It's used not just by the United States, but by the United Kingdom, by Australia, by New Zealand, and a number of our NATO European allies as well. And so that interoperability, and to some extent even interchangeability on those planes, actually makes it safer and more effective for our people. But the decision to make this choice, the decision about this plane, we had to ask the U.S. government if they would consider selling us this plane, but the decision to purchase it was made entirely in Canada in consideration of Canada's best interest. I believe that this is in the best interest of our Air Force. It's in the best interest of Canadians. This is going to help our people do the important job of keeping our country safe, to support and extend Arctic sovereignty, to hold up our responsibilities to NATO, to NORAD, and in the Indo-Pacific. It's a safer platform for our people than the one they currently work on. It's going to enable them to do the job.
Mm-hmm. Procurement, of course, as you know very well, has been an issue in this country, continues to be an issue with this country. So talk to us a bit about the time frame here, because the option is upwards of 16 Poseidons. But how quickly are we going to see this? How quickly will they be in service in this country?
Yeah, the first ones will be delivered within 2 years. We already have the opportunity to train our crews on some of our allies' planes. As a matter of fact, I had 4 of our Air Force aviators in the room today at our press conference announcing this, all of whom fly in the 140s, one of whom is actually already trained on the P-8. And so we'll begin training our crews because, and I think it'll be a fairly easy transition for them because our people are exceptionally well trained and very adaptable to the new environment. But at the same time, we expect to see the first of these planes delivered within 2 years and all of them delivered by 2028. That's very significant because it's going to enable us to manage an effective transition between the CP-140 and the P-8 plane. We're going to have to continue to maintain those 140s. They'll remain in service until replaced by the P-8, but that transition now, we have a very clear schedule on when those planes will be delivered, and that certainty is going to be very helpful to the RCAF in determining when to train their people and some of the transition and infrastructure that we're going to have to put in place in both Greenwood, Nova Scotia, and Comox, BC. This is where these planes are going to be based. We've got some work to do in those places to support the new fleet, and so that work can proceed, and we've got a pretty certain schedule about when these deliveries will be able to take place.
Minister Bill Blair, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Yeah, of course, Michael. Have a good day.
You too.